Hi everyone, Archmagos Fariston here. In today's video I'm going to cover one of the ancient races in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, namely the Tiste Andii. The Tiste Andii are an extremely ancient and powerful faction, and their history is fascinating. So strap yourself in while we uncover some of the many secrets of the Tiste Andii. The Tiste Andii are a non-human elder race and are often called the Children of Darkness. The first of Mother Dark's children, they were her dearest before light existed. Tiste Andii are immortal, and their actions could be difficult for mortals to comprehend. The leader and archmage of the Tiste Andii was Anamander Rake, who ruled by his strength of personality. Before the coming of light, the Tiste Andii lived alone in Galain, the Warren of Darkness. The city of Carcanos was their first city where they worshipped Mother Dark. At some point in the distant past, light came into the world, and the other Tiste races also came into being. The Tiste Liozan, children of light, and the Tiste Edur, children of shadow. The coming of light was a period of great turmoil for the Andii. Endorse Silan, and the survivor of the fall of Carcanos, tells of the appearance of light in the city over Carcanos, and the resulting descent into chaos of the city. In this period, Anamander Rake slew Tiam, the elder goddess of the Elaint dragons, and took her blood into himself, thus becoming a draconian soul taken. The Andii, feeling betrayed and rejected by their mother for her creation of the other Tiste, fled Galain and made Anamander Rake their lord. The Tiste Andii are described as being taller than humans, though of similar proportions. They have dark ebony skin with almond-shaped eyes which can change colour. Their hair is generally kept long and tends to be either black or silver white. If we look at their worldview, by the time of Gardens of the Moon, Rake claimed that his people were dying. No cause seems great enough to return to my people the zest for life. I try, but inspiration has never been a great talent of mine. The point of view was one of disinterest, stoicism, and quiet, empty despair. They did not seek out romantic companionship with others of their kind, finding such unions pointless. Children were sometimes born, but likely as a result of boredom. Korlat, one of the Tiste Andii, knew in her soul that some of the Andii who died in battle did so as a choice made in despair, not because they could not defend themselves. When a Tiste Andii fell in battle, their bodies were simply left on the ground where they fell. Attempts by humans to mourn and ritualize the deaths of the fallen were met by bemusement. They did not seem to place great value on typical symbols of wealth. When Malazan soldiers looted their corpses in battle, they found only plain weapons and common items such as knotted strips of coloured cloth and stream-polished pebbles. The Tiste Andii are a patient people, and their long lives give them a different perspective than short-lived mortals. For the Andii, the true measure of power lies in the wisdom to wait for the propitious moment. A Tiste Andii could be content to stand still in quiet contemplation for weeks. The culture of the Tiste Andii is very different from that of humanity. The defining trait of the Andii for many seems to be their battle against despair, whether to give in to this despair or to fight and live on. As a result, many consider the Andii to be a dour race. The Tiste Andii game Kef Tanar is a mixture of gambling and strategy, based on the succession wars in Carcanos. The game uses a number of pieces based on real people in these succession wars, and has as many sides as players. The magic of the Tiste Andii originally drew upon the elder magic of Galain, the Warren of Darkness, but some Tiste Andii draw upon Starval Demalain, the first Warren, the Warren of Dragons. At this point I want to give you a big spoiler alert. If you haven't read the books already, then stop listening now and go read the books. I don't want to ruin them for you. Alright, let's continue. So in the Gardens of the Moon, a contingent of Tiste Andii fought under Caladan Brood against the Malazan Empire in the Genabacchus campaign. They were able to pick out a claw from a considerable distance, and by the time the Siege of Pale ended, no claw operatives were left alive in the Malazan 5th and 6th armies to oppose them. In Darujistan, Tiste Andii mages started a secret war with the Assassins Guild on the rooftops of the city to prevent the guild from collaborating with the Malazans. The Andii used heavy ancient crossbows and long knives as well as sorcery, even using the power of their warrens to ascend and descend buildings. One of the first people to die by their hands was Talo Krafar, who was pursued by at least 2 mage assassins. The Tiste Andii mage assassins also tried to kill Crocus Younghand, but due to the influence of Opon, whose coin he carried, the young thief escaped all attempts on his life, and he eventually reached the safety of the Phoenix Inn. The mage assassins agreed that the sequence of events had been uncanny, and that an ascendant must have been involved. The commander of the group, Serat, decided that it might be useful to leave a witness alive to spread the rumor of their actions. Serat was one of the most talented assassins of the Andii. She was charged by her lord to hunt down the coin-bearer Crocus, but was repeatedly frustrated in her efforts by an unknown force that merely incapacitated her, rendering her unconscious on 2 occasions. Prior to the events of Memories of Ice, the Tiste Andii fought alongside the Crimson Guard and Caladan Brood against the Malazans in the Genabacchus campaign. Whiskey Jack, in a conversation with Corlat, Anamander Rake's second-in-command, noted that the Tiste Andii never pursued a retreating company, nor looted the bodies of their fallen enemies. The Tiste Andii, including Corlat, Orphantal, and Rake, accompanied the combined forces of One Arm's host and Caladan Brood's army during the Panion War. Rake was instrumental in keeping the alliance together after Caladan Brood found out Dujek One Arm was only outlawed in order to find allies against the Panion de Min. The Andii under Rake embarked on a daring tactical maneuver, taking Moon Spawn into the depths of the ocean and travelling underwater until they reached Coral, the heart of the Panion de Min's domain. There the floating fortress emerged from the sea and contributed to the defeat of the Panion de Min, but Moon Spawn was no longer able to fly. Several dozen Andii remained with Corlat, and upon reaching the city of Coral, they supported the ground troops with sorcery against a force of undead Kachain Chemal. Tiste Andii aboard Moon Spawn united in unveiling the warren Curald Galain, a feat which Caladan Brood said had not been done since the Tiste Andii arrived in this world. Silana, a red Elaint, a powerful ancient race of dragons, joined forces with Moon Spawn and helped them to advance. Ultimately, Rake crashed the floating fortress into the Panion Seer's Keep, helping to win the battle. Moonspawn was damaged after its journey under the sea, and it remained in Coral, which was now covered in a permanent gloom due to the unveiling of Curald Galain. Rake offered to bury Whiskey Jack and the bridge burners inside Moonspawn, and the Tiste Andii took up residence inside the city of Coral. At least one group of Tiste Andii arrived in the Malazan world several 100,000 years before the events of Gardens of the Moon. Among these Tiste Andii was Anamander Rake, who had separated himself from Mother Dark. Another group of Tiste Andii arrived in the Malazan world under the leadership of Silchus Ruin. Along with the Tiste Edur, they fought a devastating war against the Kachain Chemal. Despite their victory, their numbers were decimated. Of the initial 400,000 Andii, only 1,000 survived. After the battle, the Edur turned on the Andii. Skabandari Bloodeye imprisoned Silchus Ruin in a house of the Azath, which is essentially a prison for extremely powerful beings, whilst his warriors slew the Andii. Some survivors of this Andii population remain, They are the ancestors of the Blue Rose and the Sheikh, although the Andii blood in this population has been much diluted. I would like to read a passage from Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erickson. A few minutes later, Lorn found her voice. "The Empress," she said quietly, "knows how to pick her enemies." And then Tool hit her with another stunning revelation. "I am sure," the Imus said, "the Tiste Andii regret their coming to this world." They came to this world? From where? How? Why? The Tiste Andii were of Qurald Galain, the Warren of Darkness. Qurald Galain stood alone, untouched. The goddess, their mother, knew loneliness. Tool hesitated. "There is probably little truth in this story, Adjunct." "Go on," Lorn said quietly. "Please." In her loneliness, the goddess sought something outside herself. Thus was born light. Her children, the Tiste Andii, saw this as a betrayal. They rejected her. Some hold they were cast out, others that they departed their mother's embrace by choice. While Tiste Andii mages still use the Warren of Qurald Galain, they are no longer of it. And some have embraced another Warren, that of Starval Demelain. The first Warren. Tool nodded. Whose Warren did Starval Demelain belong to? It was the home of dragons, Adjunct. Alright everyone, that was some of the background and history of this mysterious and powerful race. Please leave your comments and questions below, and thanks for watching.